The mansion's marble floors stretched wide and silent, gleaming under the soft morning light that filtered through tall windows. They reflected perfection so polished they seemed untouchable. But behind that glow were hands blistered and raw, hands that worked through the night so that wealth could glitter by day. Those hands belonged to Denise Carter. Her old shoes squeaked faintly with every step, betraying the silence she tried to keep. The laces were frayed, the leather cracked, but they still carried her through endless halls. She bent low again, rag pressed into the corners where stubborn dust collected, her back screaming from hours spent hunched. To the family that owned this place, Denise wasn't a woman. She was a shadow, a presence without a voice. She was the maid, the one who existed only to make their lives shine brighter. To them, she was not worth a glance. That morning, the dining hall echoed with crystal laughter. The clinking of silver cutlery against porcelain plates filled the air as Denise moved between the tables. Her tray steady, though her arms trembled with fatigue. From the corner of her ear, she caught the hiss of a whisper. Does she even know how to walk straight? One guest mocked, lips curved into a cruel smile. The friend beside her chuckled, lifting her wine. She looks like she was dragged in from the street. Denise heard them. She always did. Every word carved into her chest like shards of glass. Her knuckles whitened as she clutched the tray tighter, but she never faltered. Her eyes stayed lowered, her lips sealed. No one in that room knew that her apron had been stitched by hand, each patch sewn on nights when she had to choose between food and thread. No one saw the calluses that told of years bent over floors that would never belong to her. She was invisible by their choice. But behind her silence, there was a strength no one could imagine, an unshakable resilience, waiting for the day the world would finally see her. And that day was coming faster than she knew. Later that morning, the sound of polished shoes echoed sharply through the corridor. Amar, Harlan, the millionaire himself, strode past, phone glued to his ear. His voice was sharp, commanding, slicing through the quiet like a blade. Denise instinctively pressed herself against the wall, lowering her gaze. For a fleeting second, the scent of his cologne wrapped around her, expensive, foreign, sharp. Then he was gone, disappearing down the hall without so much as a glance. To him, she was less than furniture, less than air. Her arms ached under the weight of fresh linen she carried, but she kept moving. And as she passed the laundry door, whispers floated out like smoke. Two younger maids stood close together, voices low but eager. "Did you see her yesterday?" one murmured. "Giving bread to those beggar kids by the back gate?" the other snorted. "Yeah. If Harlan finds out, she's done. He hates beggars. Says they ruin the view of his perfect house." Denise's step faltered. The basket dug into her hip, heavy as stone. But she didn't turn. She kept walking. She had learned long ago that in this place, even compassion was dangerous. It was true. On her way home, she had slipped stale bread rolls into the hands of children waiting in the alley. They had whispered thank you in voices so soft, but their eyes had shone with gratitude brighter than any chandelier she polished. It was the one act that gave her life meaning, the single flame of humanity she could still control. But kindness here came at a cost. The head butler had caught her once, his cold eyes drilling into hers as he hissed, "Your job is inside, not outside. Show pity again, and you'll regret it." Denise had nodded silently, swallowing the warning like poison. Yet her heart had not changed. Every time she passed the back gate, she carried the weight of choice between her survival and theirs. She didn't know it yet, but the same courage that made her share bread in secret was the courage that would soon be demanded of her in ways she never imagined. By late afternoon, the mansion transformed into a stage for wealth. Workers rushed in every direction, setting the scene for yet another glittering party. Florists carried baskets of lily and roses, their petals leaving faint trails of perfume in the air. Caterers hurried from the kitchen, trays stacked high with pastries glazed until they looked like jewels. The chandeliers, already grand, were polished again until every crystal captured the fading sunlight and fractured it into rainbows. The polished marble floors stretched out like a mirror, reflecting all the preparation. Soon, cars would line the driveway, the gates would open, and the house would glow with music, laughter, and wine. Denise moved silently among the chaos, her work unnoticed yet essential. She swept staircases, straightened chairs, and polished the last smudges from silver candlesticks. Every task demanded precision, though no guest would ever notice. Her labor was meant to vanish the moment it was finished. When the work slowed, she found herself in the narrow service corridor. A small cracked mirror hung on the wall, and she stopped there. Her reflection stared back, eyes rimmed with fatigue, hair pulled back too tightly, apron patched but spotless. She smoothed the fabric over her chest, tucking in a loose strand of hair. For a moment, her shoulders sagged. She pressed her fingers against the glass and whispered, barely audible, "Just get through tonight." Her words floated back at her from the mirror, fragile and tired. She had whispered the same thing countless times before every grand party, every night of servitude, but tonight felt different. The air in her chest was heavy, charged, as if the walls themselves held their breath. She didn't understand it, but her bones did. Something was coming. And before dawn, the very chandeliers that shone above her would tremble, not under music or laughter, but under fire. Night fell, and with it came the parade of wealth. Sleek black cars rolled through the mansion gates, headlights cutting the darkness, tires crunching over the gravel driveway. Chauffeurs in crisp uniforms opened doors, bowing as women in glittering gowns and men in sharp suits stepped out, their laughter already loud before they crossed the threshold. Spotlights swept across the sky, announcing to the city that tonight the Harlan mansion was alive. Inside, the grand ballroom was a world of its own. Chandeliers blazed so brightly, it seemed as if the stars had been dragged down from the heavens to hang above silk-draped tables. Musicians played violins that sang over the chatter, while glasses clinked, perfumes lingered heavy in the air, and golden light spilled across marble floors. And in the middle of it all, moving quietly, unseen, was Denise. Balancing a silver tray laden with champagne flutes, she wove through the crowd like a shadow. Her steps were careful, her movements practiced to perfection. To the guests, she wasn't a person. She was a tray, a uniform, a silent function. Their eyes skimmed past her as though she were invisible. But in a far corner of the room sat Ethan. The boy, no more than 11, slouched in his chair, small hands folding and unfolding a napkin as though it were the only thing anchoring him. Too young for conversations about stocks, too delicate for jokes about yachts and Monaco. The glittering world around him did not belong to him any more than it belonged to Denise. For a long moment, his gaze wandered restlessly across the room, and then it found her. Their eyes met. It was brief, almost accidental, but in that instant, Ethan's lips curved into the faintest, shyest smile, a smile not meant for the world of chandeliers and diamonds, but for the one person in the room who might understand invisibility. Denise, startled, let her eyes soften just enough. She gave a small, subtle nod. Not the kind reserved for masters or guests, but a human nod. A silent "I see you." It lasted only a second. Then the music swelled again, and the moment was gone. But something had been exchanged, something delicate, fragile, and real. Neither of them could have known that by the end of the night, that quiet connection would become their lifeline. The violin soared higher, drowning the ballroom in elegance. Laughter spilled like champagne bubbles, glasses clinked in toasts, and women twirled in gowns that glittered under the chandeliers. The party was at its peak, loud, dazzling, careless. But Denise noticed something no one else did. As she slipped between the crowd with her tray, a faint scent reached her nose. Not perfume, not roasted meat from the kitchen, something sharper, bitter, acrid, smoke. Her heart gave a jolt. She turned her head slightly, scanning the room. At first, it was barely visible, a thin gray wisp curling along the edge of the upper balcony. It could have been nothing. A candle blown out, a shadow. Then came the sound, crack. the unmistakable shatter of glass under heat. Guests gasped as orange light bloomed along the drapes of the guest wing upstairs. In a heartbeat, the room transformed. "Fire!" someone screamed. Chaos erupted. The elegance dissolved instantly into frenzy. Guests bolted for the exits. Chairs screeched across the floor, glasses shattered, and heels snapped against marble. Women clutched pearls and diamonds as if they were lifelines. Men shoved each other aside, their sharp suits flapping as they stampeded for safety. Smoke thickened, rolling into the ballroom like a dark tide. Perfume turned acrid, mingling with the stench of burning wood and fabric. The chandeliers trembled above, their brilliance dimmed by the orange glow of fire devouring the second floor. In the middle of the madness stood Mar Harlan, pale, frozen, barking orders that no one obeyed. His guards ran in all directions, fear painted across their faces. And then through the roar of fire and the shrieks of panic came a sound almost too fragile to be heard. A child's cough, thin, weak, desperate. Denise's eyes snapped toward the staircase. Ethan's chair in the corner was empty. Her stomach dropped. In the chaos, the boy had slipped away, drawn upstairs, straight into the heart of the fire. Another cough echoed, this one fainter, barely breaking through the noise. Denise's blood ran cold. She glanced around the crowd, pushed, screamed, trampled, but not one person moved toward the flames. Not even Ethan's father. Her tray trembled in her hands. She set it down on the nearest table with a sharp clink, the decision already burning in her chest. In that moment, there was no servant, no millionaire, no invisible divide. There was only a boy alone choking in the fire, and Denise knew, if no one else would go for him, she would. Denise's hands trembled as she placed the silver tray on the nearest table. A glass toppled and rolled, but she didn't care. Her pulse thundered in her ears, louder than the screaming crowd. Around her, chaos ruled. The wealthy shoved past one another, their jewels catching the last flickers of chandelier light. A woman stumbled, clutching her fur shawl closer than she clutched her friend. A man cursed, elbowing his way toward the door. The guards barked orders that vanished in the smoke. No one moved toward the staircase. But Ethan's cough echoed again, faint, barely human. Denise's jaw tightened. Her fear didn't vanish. It burned hotter, deeper, but it bent into something else, resolve. She darted behind the buffet table, grabbed a linen cloth, and plunged it into a bucket of melted ice, soaking it until water dripped down her arms. With steady hands, she pressed it over her mouth and nose, tucking it tightly under her chin. Another cloth she wrapped around her palms. The fabric clung to her blistered hands like a second skin, a shield against the burning heat she knew waited. As she turned toward the staircase, a guard lunged, grabbing her elbow. "Ma'am, out this way. You'll be killed." Denise wrenched her arm free, her eyes fierce through the haze. "There's a boy upstairs," she said firmly, her voice low but uncheckable. The guard hesitated, but another voice cut through the smoke, sharp and dismissive. "Not worth it. Let her go, she's just the maid." Denise didn't waste breath to answer. Her feet carried her forward, steady, purposeful. The polished wood of the rail burned hot under her palm as she gripped it. Smoke coiled down the staircase, thick and heavy, pressing against her lungs. She bent low, her knees brushing the steps as she climbed, every muscle coiled tight. The mansion groaned above her, beams cracking, walls sighing like a wounded beast. Still, she pressed upward, each breath measured, each step deliberate. Then through the roar of fire came the sound she had been chasing. A cough, weak, fragile, followed by the faintest whimper. Ethan. Denise's chest tightened. She didn't think of herself anymore. Not her burns, not the danger, not the death that waited in every flame. She thought only of the boy who had smiled at her when no one else did. And she swore, with every step, every breath, I will not let him die alone. But what awaited her behind that door upstairs would test her strength in ways she never imagined. The hallway was a furnace. Flames gnawed at door frames, blistering the paint until it bubbled like boiling skin. Smoke swirled thick and angry, stinging Denise's eyes and clawing her throat through the damp cloth tied across her face. She crawled low, one hand skimming along the baseboard, the other clutching the cloth tighter over her mouth. Her knees scraped the carpet, already smoldering at the edges. Every breath came shallow, controlled, her body trembling from heat and fear. Then she heard it soft, broken, almost swallowed by the roar of fire. A cough, a child's cough. Her heart jolted. She counted the doors, her ears straining. The sound came again, weaker now, from the second door on the right. She pressed her hand against the knob, searing hot. She recoiled, then wrapped the cloth around her palm and shoved her shoulder into the door. The wood resisted, swollen from the heat, but with a grunt she forced it open. A wave of smoke and heat rolled over her like a living beast. The curtains were spitting embers, their edges glowing red. The ceiling groaned as if ready to collapse. And there, huddled in the corner by the bed, was Ethan. His small body was curled into itself, his hands pressed weakly over his mouth. His face was flushed crimson, eyes glassy with tears and smoke. When he saw her, his lips parted, but no sound came, just a trembling breath. Denise's chest tightened. She dropped low, crawling across the burning carpet, ignoring the sting of sparks biting into her arms. "Ethan." Her voice was calm, soft, almost like a lullaby. "I'm here." The boy tried to stand, but his legs buckled. He swayed, coughing violently. Denise reached him, pulled the damp cloth from her shoulder, and pressed it over his mouth. Then, with steady arms, she wrapped him against her chest. His tiny body was so light, so fragile. His heartbeat thudded against her ribs, frantic and weak. "Breathe with me," she whispered, her lips close to his ear. "Slow, steady. You're not alone." Ethan clung to her neck, his little fingers digging into her apron. She turned her back toward the flames, shielding him with her own body. The fire crackled louder, angrier. Above them, the ceiling split with a deafening crack. A beam groaned, sagging dangerously. Denise's eyes darted to the doorway. The path out was there, narrow, treacherous, but waiting. She knew she had only moments before the fire sealed it shut. Denise tightened her hold on Ethan, his frail body trembling against her chest. His coughs came sharp and shallow, each one stabbing her heart like a blade. She adjusted the cloth over his face, smoothing his damp hair with her thumb, her own lungs burning with every breath. The hallway roared around them, flames tearing at wallpaper, furniture collapsing into ash. The mansion groaned and cracked like an old skeleton giving way. Denise kept low, pressing her palm to the wall, feeling her way forward as if the ridges of the baseboard could guide her out of hell. At the top of the staircase, she hesitated. The banister was searing hot beneath her blistered hand. The first step glowed faintly at the edges, charred but still intact. She tested it with her foot, her entire body coiled, ready to retreat if it gave way. It held. 1 step, 2, 3. Each groan of the wood echoed in her ears like a death knell. Ethan whimpered softly, his arms tightening around her neck. "Shh?" Denise whispered through the cloth, though her own voice shook. "I've got you. Just hold on." Halfway down she stopped. To her left, a small window pane cracked open from the heat. A trickle of night air seeped through, cool and clean. Denise pressed her forehead to the glass for a second, tilting Ethan toward it. "Breathe here," she urged. His small lips parted, gulping the thin stream of fresh air. It steadied him, if only a little. Below, voices broke through the roar of the fire. "My God, someone's still in there." "It's the maid. She has the boy. She's crazy." "No, she's brave." The words barely reached her, muffled by the chaos. She couldn't afford to listen. The final flight of stairs stretched before her, flames crawling greedily up the banister, licking at the steps. To the left, smoke was too dense, a wall of choking black. To the right, through the haze, she spotted it. The servants' gallery door, wedged open just enough by a mop bucket. A way out. Her legs trembled, her lungs screamed, but she angled toward it, pressing her shoulder forward. shielding Ethan as though her own body were a shield of flesh and bone. The door was only a few steps away, but when she reached it, it caught on its swollen frame, refusing to open fully. Denise braced her foot, shoved hard, the wood groaning under her weight. Ethan whimpered, clutching her tighter. The flames roared closer. If the door didn't give way now, both of them would be lost. Denise pressed her shoulder against the gallery door with all her strength. The swollen wood groaned but barely moved. Behind her, the flames hissed and clawed at the hallway, creeping closer, tasting the air. Ethan whimpered into her neck, his breath hot and shallow. She braced her foot against the frame, grit her teeth, and shoved again. Her muscles screamed, her burned hands slipping against the wood. "Come on," she gasped through clenched teeth. "Please." "Open." The door creaked wider, just enough. Cold night air rushed through the gap, brushing her face like a blessing. With a desperate twist, she turned her body sideways, shielding Ethan with her arms, and squeezed them both through the narrow opening. The frame scraped her shoulders raw, but finally they stumbled out. Gravel crunched beneath her knees as she half collapsed onto the courtyard stones. The sudden rush of fresh air hit her lungs like fire and water at once, searing, cleansing, overwhelming. She lowered Ethan carefully, as though he were glass. His small chest rose and fell in jagged bursts, each inhale stronger than the last. He was alive. For a long second, Denise couldn't move. She just kept her hand on the boy's back, feeling the fragile rhythm of his breathing. Around them, voices swelled. Guards, servants, even the glittering guests who had fled earlier all stood in a widening circle, their jeweled eyes wide, their whispers sharp. "She carried him out," she went in when all of us ran. "My God, she saved him." Their voices trembled with awe, but Denise barely heard them. Her vision blurred, her strength finally giving way. Paramedics rushed forward, kneeling beside her, guiding Ethan into careful hands. One of them turned to help her, but Denise clutched the boy a second longer, unwilling to let go until she felt him breathe deep, steady, safe. Only then did her fingers loosen, shaken violently as they fell into her lap. She exhaled hard, the air curling white in the cool night. For the first time since the fire began, her body trembled not from action, but from release. The crowd stared in silence at the woman they had mocked only hours before, the invisible maid who had walked through fire when they had run. But Denise barely noticed their stares. Her gaze stayed fixed on Ethan, alive in the night air. And yet, she didn't know that the greatest confrontation was still ahead, because soon she would face not the fire, but the Father. The world returned in fragments, white ceilings, the faint smell of antiseptic, the steady beep of distant monitors. Denise stirred slowly, her body aching as if every muscle had been carved from stone. For a moment, she thought she was still trapped in the fire. Then she felt it. A hand small, warm, trembling wrapped tightly around her own. Her gaze drifted down, and there was Ethan, perched on a chair too big for him. His face pale but clean now, his eyes ringed with the shadow of fear. He didn't speak. He just squeezed her hand harder, as though afraid that letting go might bring the flames back. Denise blinked back tears she didn't allow herself to shed in the fire. She shifted, wincing as pain tore through her shoulders. A nurse hurried forward, adjusting pillows, speaking gently. "You're safe now. Rest." But before she could, footsteps echoed outside the door, measured, heavy. The kind of footsteps that made a room hold its breath. The door opened. Mr. Harlan entered. He looked nothing like the untouchable figure who once stormed past her without a glance. His tie was gone, his hair disheveled, his shirt sleeves wrinkled. For the first time, his hands were empty, no phone, no papers, no armor of power. Only silence. The room shifted with his presence. Nurses paused. Even Ethan sat straighter, though he never let go of Denise's hand. Mr. Harlan's eyes, usually sharp and cold, landed on the woman lying weak but unbroken in the bed. He spoke, his voice low, uncertain, as if unused to carrying gratitude. "They told me." He paused, his throat tightening. They told me you carried my boy out of the fire." The words hung in the sterile air, heavier than gold. He looked at his son, alive, still clinging to the maid's hand, then back at her. "You could have run. You should have run, but you didn't." Denise swallowed, her throat dry. Her lips parted, a faint rasp escaping. He was alone. The silence that followed was thick, stretching taut between them. Then, to the astonishment of everyone in the room, Mr. Harlan sat down. The leather chair creaked under his weight, his elbows resting on his knees. For the first time, he didn't look through her. He looked at her. "What you did," his voice faltered, then steadied. "I cannot repay. Money, titles, none of it is enough, but I will try." Denise stared, unsure if her ears deceived her. Gratitude from the man who had never once said her name? It felt impossible. But then Ethan spoke for him. His voice, small but certain, filled the room. "Dad, she's family now." The words cracked something open in the millionaire's chest. And sometimes, love strong enough to walk through fire becomes the light that changes everything. His jaw tightened, his breath caught, but he didn't correct his son. Instead, he nodded once, firm. "From today," he said, his voice carrying an oath, "you will never scrub another floor in my house. You will have a home in it." Denise's eyes welled. She hadn't cried when mocked, hadn't cried when crawling through fire. But hearing those words, feeling Ethan's hand still gripping hers, her tears finally fell. By morning, news would spread of the maid who saved the mansion. Cameras would flash, headlines would sing of sacrifice. But away from the noise, in the quiet of that hospital room, something greater had shifted. A boy had found a protector. A father had found humility. And a woman the world had ignored had finally been seen. Sometimes the quietest souls carry the loudest strength.